everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, What's New in Autodesk Build. This webinar is brought to you by Applied Software GRAITEC Group. My name is Misty Scott, and I am pleased to be your moderator. As a reminder, you can find a schedule of upcoming events, webinars, and training on our calendar at asti.com/calendar. Very pleased to introduce our expert today. Mark Petrucci is an implementation consultant for construction at Applied Software GRAITEC Group. In his role, Mark is a trusted technical advisor to our clients, providing technical expertise and strategic insight for a diverse architecture, engineering, construction, and building owner customer base. That was a mouthful, Mark. There's a lot of T's in that. Thank you so much for joining us today. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to you.
All right. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Let me go ahead and get my presentation going here. So today, actually, we already went through introduction, so I'm going to skip past that slide. Then we're going to go through how do you know what's new? You know, instead of waiting for me, once a month, once a quarter to talk about what's new, I'm going to show you where you can find it yourself. And then we're going to talk about specifically some things that are new inside of Docs, inside of Build, and inside of some ACC administration. And then if you have any questions, feel free to put any of the questions in the chat, and I'll address those questions at the end of the presentation. All right. So we'll go right past the introduction. We've already covered that. So let's talk about how do you know what's new. Now, I'm not going to, this entire presentation isn't going to be PowerPoint based, so some of it will be live. So it'll be a little bit more interactive and you guys can actually see the picks and clicks. Other parts I do have in a video format. But for now, let's first talk about, where do you find, what's new? Of course, you can always Google it. All right, so you can Google Autodesk Construction Cloud, what's new? It'll take you to a page. However, if you are already logged in to the Autodesk Construction Cloud, and I believe this still applies to BIM 360 if you're in the BIM 360 environment or platform, but everything I'm going to be showing you is on the new unified platform or the new ACC platform. And so you can click on that gray little circle with the little question mark. It pops up. Go ahead and click on help. Then you will see on the left hand side, you will have to scroll down and look for what's new. Sometimes it may take you to a specific page, a different link, I should say. So you may want to scroll up or down until you find what's new. And then once you go ahead and expand on it, on the right hand side, you're going to see some of the shortcuts to the different tools that you can review or the different products that you can review. Now, real quick, let me just show you live. And we are going to jump right over to here. Nope, we are going to jump over to right over to here. So I'll show it to you live here. If you click on the help right up here, click help. And notice it took me right to Construction Cloud. Now, pay attention right up here. It says Autodesk Docs. And the reason it says Docs is because that's where I was. I was in Docs first. If you happen to be in Build and you do the same thing, you're going to see it's going to take you to Autodesk Build. It's actually going to be the same help screen. It's just have different links. But the what's new is going to be the same. And notice when I click on what's new, May 2024, we can see all the products listed. And so it doesn't matter if I get to it through Docs, Design Collaboration, Model Coordination. It doesn't matter which ACC product I use. They're all going to take me to the same location, at least for what's new. Okay. All right, let's jump back over to the PowerPoint. Actually, I'll just show it. I'm not going to even talk about it here. I'll just show it to you here. When I click on administration, you will see all the different updates that have come out, at least this month. And you could read up on it. And if you notice that many of the updates right at the very end, it says learn more. So you could always find out some more information. Most likely, it's going to take you to a different page, and you can refer to the information on that page. So here are some of the updates dealing with administration. Here are some of the updates dealing with Build. okay, and some of the updates dealing with docs. Now, I won't go through every single update. I'm going to hit some of the high points, or what I think are high points, or some of the things that I've been waiting on. And so we'll take a look at that. So we're going to jump past this. And now let's talk about what's new with Autodesk Docs. So we're going to focus on just a few things here. We're going to first look at, packages in the file section. Then we're going to take a look at naming standards. We'll look at some updates to the issues. And by the way, that update also applies to Build. And then we'll take a look at some of the updates to markup tools. Okay, but there's many more than just the 4 that I have listed here. So first, let's talk about packages. Now, for those of you that have been using BIM 360 for a while, or the new ACC for a while, and if you specifically use design collaboration, you're probably familiar with packages. This package is different. It's separate from that. So, sometimes Autodesk will reuse terms in different parts of ACC, and they mean slightly different things. But let's talk about what packages are here in terms of docs. So packages in the file section, it helps users organize their version files into groups that can represent milestones and scopes, and it provides a more flexible, controlled document management. Now, that was kind of a nice way to say, what do we typically do when we want to keep versions of files? Many times people will copy files from one folder to another, and they might create a folder and they might call it, May 1st backup, May 7th backup. So that's not something we want to do. So since the folders help keep track of file versions, and a file cannot be copied into 2 folders at the same time without duplicating it, packages remove the duplication. Okay, it removes that headache because it allows one file version to exist, and I could have that file exist in multiple packages while still respecting folder permissions. So again, and I'll show this to you live, we are not going to make copies of files and put them in separate folders. I'm going to make a package, and then I'll save my files in packages. Now, for those of you that have been around for a while with BIM 360, this is very similar to BIM 360 sets. All right, so within BIM 360 docs, they had sets. So this kind of closes the gap where it's got the same feature in BIM 360 docs as it now has in Autodesk docs. So before I jump into the live demo, let me just mention some of the things that we can do with packages. Okay, once we create the package and there's going to be files in the package, we can view the files, we can open the files, we can publish them to Build, we can export the files, we can share the files from the packages, and then we can download, we can submit for review, and we can create transmittals. So they almost act just like, not almost, they act just like files that are not in a package, except the package is a snapshot in time of a bunch of files that you want to keep for a specific reason. So let's take a look at that live. So here's my demo project. Now I'm going to jump over to Docs, but I don't have to use Docs because remember, the file section is the same in Docs as it is in Build. But what you'll notice here with packages, I can scroll down to any of my files, and maybe I'll scroll down to this PDF folder, and I can select this file, and you'll notice when I select on it, I can now go ahead and assign this to a package. Right there it says Add to Package. Now I can pick an existing package, and I already have one called 50% CDs, but instead of doing that, what I can do is I can first review this, and then I can type in the new package name by simply hitting Create New Package. So, and I'll just say Webinar Example. And I'll go ahead and I'll create that package. So in that package, it's including just that one PDF file. I could simply hit the Add button, And now I've got a package. You'll notice right over here it says packages. And I've got a package here called webinar example. Well, one file doesn't really need a package. So what I could do is when I select on it, I do have the ability now to add additional files. And now I could add whatever file types I want in here. So I can go over here and I could select maybe a Revit model, a PDF file. Looking for my AutoCAD drawings here. We'll grab this AutoCAD drawing. I can go to a completely different folder and grab whatever files are in those other folders. When I bring them in, I also have the option to switch what version that I want to include in this package. And then I'll simply hit the Add button. Now these files are part of a package. And if this week I've got architects, engineers, contractors, if they are uploading or revising any of these files, the version numbers will change with the files, but not here in the package. These will all remain version 1. So I don't have to worry about making backups of these files. I have the original files here that I wanted, quote, a snapshot in time. And like I said, we could always select files. We could remove them. I could share them with people. I could come in here. I could submit them for review. I can create a transmittal. And I can even download them if I decide to do that. So this is a great way of not having to create duplicate files within your project. Okay. So we'll jump back out of this. And that's why, if you haven't noticed it, here's the folders, and then right here are our packages. Okay. By the way, this was mentioned in the slide earlier. The permissions, okay, the permissions are important throughout ACC. The same permissions that are applied to a file in any of these folders, the same permissions do exist within the package. Okay, so don't think that once you add a file to a package, if somebody else logs in and looks at that package, they have additional permissions. They have the exact same permissions they've always had. Okay. All right, now let's jump back in here and let's take a look at naming standards. All right, so this I think is a really big deal. This has been long-awaited release for customers. So now within Docs, project administrators, they can apply more than one naming standard to their projects. And they could also edit, copy, and delete the naming standard. And this wasn't something that we were able to do previously. Previously, there was only one naming standard, and when you turned it on for the entire project. And I used to warn people and said, hey, don't turn on naming standards if you're not going to use them. Don't turn them on in your real project. Create a test project, turn them on, and see if you like naming standards and how they work. One of my comments with naming standards was, one, I couldn't disable it if I turned it on, and number two, I was always forced to use a specific naming standard, which is the ISO 19650. And so today we can create up to 20 naming standards per project. And we have 3 available options. We could use the ISO 19650. We can start with a blank naming standard, or we can import a naming standard from an Excel file. What that really means is you can create your own naming standard, and it doesn't have to be just one. So that's a really, to me, that gives me a lot of control as a BIM manager to be able to control file naming. Now, we also have support for a holding area. So as files get uploaded, if they don't follow the naming standard, the files could still be uploaded, but they're put in holding area. And the person who uploaded the file, they will then have to go there and they have to rename it there. Or a project administrator could do that as well. In addition, subfolders can have different naming standards from the parent folder. So there's a lot more flexibility when it comes to naming standards. And what Autodesk has done is they've also included a folder icon to let you know when a standard's been applied. And so that's really useful as well. And hold on one second here, my mouse, I got to fix that. And then finally, we also have the ability where when we create the naming standard, we have to create what's called attributes, and we can create those attributes on the fly. And so I'll show that to you, and hopefully you guys will start thinking about using the naming standard. As a former BIM manager, IT manager, I was always frustrated when my users would not follow naming standards, whether it's for folders or files on my network. I wanted a naming standard so it was consistent. The naming standard for the files that get uploaded to ACC docs is huge. So let's take a look at that. So in this example, I have a folder right down here, and notice the little checkbox that you see right there next to that folder. That indicates that this folder has a naming standard applied to it. And it actually shows you right there when I hover over it, says the naming standard is Acme Project Revit file. And so for a particular project, I'm going to say we're going to apply a particular naming standard. If I select on that file or that folder, notice you don't see any files. The reason for that is because I purposely uploaded files that did not follow the naming standard. So now, where did those files go? Come right over here to the holding area. And you've probably seen this holding area in the past. But if we didn't use it, sorry about that. If we didn't use it, people just ignored it. But now you can actually see the files that were uploaded. They were all going to the same folder, but they don't follow my naming standard. If I select Validate All, it now shows me all of my files listed, and from here, I now have to rename these files. So this one says project number 865. This really, it tells me right up here, it says this is required, and the character length has to equal 4. So I'm going to put in here just 4 digits. Then I have to put in the discipline. What is this file? Is it an architectural file, a mechanical file? I purposely configured this so that people had to pick the discipline instead of typing it in. And so, depending on the file type, I'm going to go ahead and pick structural because that's what this is. And then notice I'm actually forcing a version of the Revit file to be included with the file name. How many times, especially with Revit, we know it's important on the Revit file. The versioning is important. So this is a 2024 project. This one now follows the naming standard. And all I have to do for the rest of these, apply the same naming standard. And since these all are part of the same project, I'll simply come in here and put in the same project number. This was supposed to be my electrical file, but it's missing. I can't tell just by looking at it. Notice it's just, I renamed this and I gave it the wrong number. I deleted part of it, but I know that's electrical. This one here says it's mechanical, so I'll switch this one to mechanical. And this one says ABC Architects, and I'll switch this to architectural. And these should all be Revit 2024. Now, I'm doing this as a project administrator, but the people who actually uploaded the file, they could also do this. And now if I hit the save button, and if I come back out here to folders, here are my files, and notice the naming standard that's been applied. I'll show you one more thing here as far as how to apply a naming standard. You need to be a project administrator to do this. I'll hit Settings. I'll come down here to Naming Standard. And I created a naming standard called Acme Project Revit File Naming Standard. You can name this whatever you want. Now, if you follow the ISO 19650, that one has a strict naming standard that you have to follow. I'm going to use the blank one. And here I will give this a name, and I'll say webinar, example. And I just got to fix my fingers here. And here I wanted to show you how to create those attributes. Right here, it says select attributes. These are existing ones that I already created. If you want, you can create new attributes, and maybe you put in here company name. And so when you, oops, actually that doesn't exist, my bad. Go over here, I'll hit create attribute, and now I'll put in here company name. And I could require where people can just simply type in some text, or I can do a drop-down list. So I want people to put in their company name or their company initials. And you know what? People could make it as long or as short as they want, or under character settings, I could force a length. I could say any length or a fixed length, maybe a certain number of characters, or a range, anywhere from 1 to 10 characters. And I can decide on the character type. Obviously, if I come up here and I change this to drop-down list, I could start typing in maybe, if I know that I'm working with a specific group of engineers and architects, maybe I can put in their company name right here, or their company initials. And my company is ASTI/GRAITEC, but I'll just abbreviate it. And so now people have to pick from a list. So what I'll do here real quick, just to show you one more thing, I'm going to go ahead and create the company name. I will select discipline and project number, just those three, because I wanted to show you right now, this is the order in which how you're going to name your file. If you want to rearrange the order, right here in front is a little button. You hover your mouse over it. You can now say, yep, project number first, then company name, then discipline. And if you need, don't forget, especially if it's for Revit, include this. If it's not for Revit, maybe you don't include it. But it's that simple to create a naming standard. Now, you can't create that naming standard if files already exist in the folder. So just be aware. If there are files in there that you want to force to a naming standard, you'll need to either create a new folder, apply the standard, and then copy the files in there. And when you do that, then it will force you to make them follow a naming standard. Okay, but you can't apply the standard if there's already files in there. So that's a big deal. I think we're going to see this used a lot more on projects because now we have a lot of flexibility to control what our naming standards are going to be for each file. Okay. All right, let's jump back over to PowerPoint. So we just looked at multiple naming standards. Okay. I'm not going to show you anything live with the additional permissions for issues, but I do want to explain they did add some additional permissions. You'll see here it says view and assign issues for their company. So when you assign people that permission, they can only view issues and assign issues to people within their company. Typically, we'll do that for like subcontractors. During the construction phase, we'll say the subcontractors, if they want, they can create their own issues, or they can view any issues that have been assigned to anybody else within their company. The next one says view issues for their company and assign issues to anyone else. Okay, and so here we have the ability, we can now assign issues to other people. Then we have full visibility. Somebody with full visibility, they can see all the issues. They could also edit and assign issues. And finally, the very bottom one is manage, which is typically limited to just to administrators, and that's automatically assigned. So the permissions have changed slightly. You may not notice it, but if you go into a project, you'll see that they have changed. This is a big deal. I think this one is really important. Autodesk came out with a feature called Bridge not too long ago. And the advantage of Bridge is that I can take files from my project and I can copy them, share them with another project. So a good example of that is an architect has their own ACC project and they need to share their Revit model maybe with the engineers or with the general contractor. Now, in the past, the architect might put their files on the general contractor's account. And the general contractor would have to set up permissions for the architect to work in there. And the architects are like, I don't want to give the GC my project files until I'm ready. So when Autodesk developed Bridge, that allowed for everybody to work in their own ACC environment and then, or ACC project, and when ready, they can copy the files over to the other project. That was great for architects and engineers, except if I'm an engineer and I wanted to link in the architect's model, when they bridged it over to me, I could link it in. Great, I'm good to go. But then as soon as the architect would bridge over another file, bridge the file over because it changed, it updated, Bridge would make a copy of the file. It wouldn't overwrite the file. It would make another copy. And now I had to go in there and I had to update my links in my Revit model. Now, when you share new versions of a file with Bridge, where the file is shared one time and then you share it again manually, the file now replaces the older version in the receiving project rather than creating a duplicate. So this removes a lot of headaches for the users to having to relink files. So this is a really, really big deal, especially for architects and engineers who are collaborating on projects but want to stay within their own ACC environment, but want the ability to share their projects or their files with others involved in the project. Markup tool. So, I should say that if you don't pay attention to the what's new, you don't check it periodically, some stuff you'll just see appear. They'll just show up on the screen and you're like, oh, looks like Autodesk updated some things. That's what happened to me with the markup tool. They added some additional markup capabilities, both on the mobile device as well as the desktop. And I'll just quickly show that to you here. And I'll jump back over to a project. And I'll just jump into a quick PDF here and I'll just show you the markup tool. So jump down, I'll just grab a file down here. Let's find something else. If I was in Build, I'd open up a floor plan pretty quick, but I'm not going to jump into Build just yet. But the same applies inside of Build. So your toolbar looks pretty much like it's always looked, except now when you come down here to the measurement tool, you'll see that we actually have additional functionality. And so this needs to be calibrated at 1/8 inch. So let me calibrate that real quick. And I'll select my feet in fractional inches, and we'll go to the 1/8 inch. And so now what you'll see is, we've always had the ability to do a straight line and a line, now and a polyline. And so now we've got some additional functionality, such as my freeform tool. Okay, so I can freeform, and notice it's also shown me the total length. This is something else that's changed. Notice the value of the dimension is now in a rectangle. And so if I pick a couple other ones here, I've always been able to do a rectangular area. That's always been available. But on some of my projects, like this one up here, in the past, there was nothing I could do. And notice that my building is rotated. So this area, I could never get that just right. Now what I can do is come down here and use a polygonal area right here. So now I have the ability that I can snap to the corners here. Now, by the way, I did say snap, guys, which is not precise. It's not exactly a snap, but I can get pretty close. And so the area is much further than it was, much better than it was when it was rectangular. Okay. So now I can do polygonal areas. And then finally, the last one here is a freeform area. And when I select on that one, you'll notice that I can just simply outline an area and it will highlight it. Okay. So those are some markup tools that were missing in the past. And I always struggled when I was doing demos and I had this angular building that my rectangle would not fit properly. And now that I can draw it by simply picking the vertices of the room or the corners, I get an accurate area. As long as I'm in here, let me just mention this as well. And I got a slide that's going to show this. But when I draw my revision clouds here, and I come in here and I can change the color of my revision, or my clouds, excuse me, and I'll make that green and I'll put in a fill of yellow. Okay. So you're probably aware that if you do this and then you start drawing some additional shapes, it's going to remember those the settings, such as the color of the fill and the color of the lines. But when you get out and then you go back in, that used to reset. Now it remembers it. So if you do make any sort of changes to colors and fills, it will remember that from sheet to sheet. Okay, so that is another change that's been applied. All right. And here's this slide here. This is called persistent palettes. And so the palettes were persistent. So it looks like it applies to the border color, the border opacity, which is the fill. I'm sorry, not the fill. The opacity is whether it's going to be transparent or solid, the border thickness, and the same applies for the fill color, opacity, and the text color and the text size. Text size, that's a big deal. Sometimes you may want to adjust that size, and you don't want to have to do it again and again as you switch to different sheets. Okay. Oh, quick reference. Now, this one may not be obvious to you, but this actually is a huge time saver. And let me just show you in this example. Again, I'm going to jump down to a sheet here. And I want a floor plan view here. In the past, whenever we would create a markup, and let me go ahead and just remove this fill color, and I'll set this back to red. If I place the markup here, in the past, if I wanted to reference this markup to something else, I would have to touch on it, then I would have to hit edit, and then I'd have to come over here and hit reference. And then I have to go to reference, and I could say, oh yeah, let me reference another sheet, or maybe reference a file or an RFI. So you can see the added clicks there. Well, now when I click on it, I don't have to do that. I don't have to hit edit and then reference. It's right here. Now I could reference, and I could reference another sheet, a file, or an RFI. So I've saved a few clicks, and it makes perfect sense to add it here. So nice job, putting in what seems like a little update, but actually is a big time saver if you're using a lot of references in the project. So what about Autodesk Build? So there are some changes in with the official response. Okay, currently, or in the past, an RFI manager or coordinator, they need to include supporting documentation like a PDF or a photo with their RFI reference. And they have to add it as a reference, okay, to the RFI. The problem with that is that all references for an RFI, they're displayed in the same list. So any references that were part of the RFI's original question will be mixed in with references that are part of the answer or the response. So this makes it pretty difficult for the user to identify which references are part of the official answer, the official response. So especially when there's a lot of references to the RFI. So this can lead to a lot of time wasted and the missing of important information. Now RFI managers and coordinators, they'll be able to upload and add attachments when they're submitting the official RFI response, and it won't be merged in with all the other references. Okay. Now let's talk about public report link and notifications. Now this is a setting. You actually have to be an administrator to get to this setting, and it's not real obvious, but within the settings section at the very bottom, it says include RFI report links in email notifications. All right, so this looks familiar to what happened in March. Originally, the feature was going to be implemented, automatically across every project, but changes were made that allowed administrators to be able to enable and disable this feature. So, this is the release. So, as a refresher, currently external collaborators in the RFI process, they can respond to an RFI by responding to the email notification. But there is not always enough information in the email to provide a proper response. So, for example, they can't see what references are attached to the RFI in the email. Because of that, they're often missing important details. So, and this is one of the features, it drove me crazy. When I created an RFI, when I say assign to a person, I can type in an email address. That RFI would go to that person, but they would miss any references, any supporting documentation. And so that was always frustrating, because then I had to invite people to the project, and I had to show them how to use RFIs. When the email system was much easier to use, simply emailing back and forth. So as a result, customers are having to download the RFI report manually, or you guys have had to download the RFI report manually, then send it to the collaborators, and in addition, download any of the references and send that to them as well. Many times we had to simply export out to PDF, and then we would send the PDF off to whoever we wanted to share that RFI with. And so now when they receive an email, they will see a link. It says here, linked document. And now they can see all the references that are part of that RFI. So this is strictly email. We create the RFI in Build, then we email it to somebody. They get the question, and they could also click on the link and download the supporting documentation. Now RFIs, now the reviewers, they'll be able to edit the responses, after they submit it. Now, if a reviewer needs to change or add something to the RFI response, they just need to click on it, and they can click on it, and there's a new pen icon that they'll be able to select, and then they can edit the response. So with submittals, if a member, and if a member is removed from a project, their name is replaced now with former member throughout the submittal, meaning any submittal activity that was done by that person, it'll just simply change to show that it was done by a former member. And this can get confusing and can be frustrating when trying to figure out who did what, within the submittals or RFI. So now instead, the removed members' names can be changed to, now instead of the removed member's name being changed to former member in submittals, their first name and last names will still be displayed. Okay. And so no company or role will be displayed, but their names will be. So, and this will be standard across the different ACC tools. Okay. Forms. All right. Forms are a big deal inside of Build. And so, there can be some large forms. As part of the effort to scale form capabilities, Autodesk is introducing increased limits and options. So now drop-downs will go up to 100 options, and single and multi-select will have 40 options each. Additionally, the character limit for text responses is now up to 8,000. Some of you may think that this is a lot more than you'll ever need, but I've had a few customers that reached out to me and say, hey, I've reached the limit, where I could have 20 sections and 20 questions per section. I need more. So Autodesk has opened it up and expanded the abilities to have additional questions within your forms. Last year was introduced a request where we could add a review workflow, which customers loved, and they're looking to integrate it further into the forms workflow, but it needs more flexibilities. Customers have shared that there are situations like an accidental add of review or a change in the workflow. It'll leave the company, and the review step there's a review step that needs to be completed. Now we have the option where we can turn off or remove that review work step. Actually, let me click right here. So you will notice right over here, there's a review option where you can turn off that review work step. And that'll happen because sometimes, again, we don't need that review step, and it might be part of the form, and so we can disable that. And real quick, just a couple things here under administration. Now, the correspondence section here, okay, this is actually part of Build and BIM Collaborate. And if you're a project member using correspondence today, you get an email notification for all correspondence activity that involves you. So you'll be notified whenever your name, your role, or your company is mentioned with correspondence. And you'll also get notification when you upload emails to this tool. So some notifications are super important to see. For instance, you don't want to miss the email alert that you were mentioned in a thread, while at the same time, you might not really want to get notification every time you upload emails to the tool. So in response to that, Autodesk has added correspondence and advanced notification settings page, or they added it to the advanced notification settings page, which means that these notifications will be able to be turned on and off. So again, typically the project administrators will have access to the notification page that's within project settings. And for those of you who've never seen the notifications, we have complete control over notifications for all parts of Build, how often and who gets notified for issues and forms and RFIs, submittals. In this case, we're talking correspondence. And so we can control the frequency in which those emails get sent. And there's different frequencies for different products. And so there's frequencies such as instantly or hourly or daily or even never. So there's a lot more flexibility to control how often emails are sent out. And the last thing we'll take a look at here is an activity log. And for those that have used BIM 360, this will look familiar to you or somewhat familiar to you. Again, I do need to be a project administrator to do this. So I'll switch over to Project Admin. And notice right over here it says Activity. And now we have the ability to look at all the activity related to this project. And you can see right here activity, whether it was in Autodesk Docs, whether it was in the sheet section of Build, whether it was an issue. We can see who was involved with that activity, and then some details around that activity. Now this list can get pretty long. Okay, this is a new feature. I've had this project for a long time, so it was actually turned on, but it can only tell me the history since it was first turned on. But if this, a year from now I come back to this project, good thing to do is to take a look at the date range. I could sort this activity by date range. And I can also look at all the activity by a specific person. And so that could be a feature. And I don't see anybody else jumping into my project, so I don't need to pick on anybody else right here, but I can also filter activity by that person. Okay. All right. jump back over to here. Questions. That's it, guys. There's a lot more. I only covered maybe about 30% of what's new. Maybe about 70% of Docs and Build, but the rest of ACC, there's a lot, many more updates than what I went over. So, any questions on what I covered?
Fantastic, Mark. As of now, we don't have any questions in the chat. You guys feel free to drop those questions in there for Mark. Seems like a lot of really great things were added. Curious, Mark, what do you think is the best one? I know you were excited about the naming. Which one do you think is the most exciting update?
That's a good question. I will tell you, just because of my days as a former BIM manager and IT manager, the file naming is a big one. That one I really liked. But from a day-to-day use, I like the improvements in the markup tools. I was always frustrated with the existing markups. Why can't I was always forced to a rectangle that was just one way. I couldn't rotate it. And so it was always very frustrating trying to create markups that way. So I like the markups because that's something I would use daily. The packages, I think there's a lot of potential with the packages. I guess it all depends on the customers and how they've handled versions in the past if they were creating duplicates. We do have, Autodesk does provide customers unlimited storage. So, you might think about, creating duplicates is not that big a deal. However, when you have to manage a lot of files, and especially duplicate files, the packages can really be a really big deal to help you not create duplicate files. I'm just taking a quick peek at some of the other things. So the markups, I said day-to-day would be a big deal. The RFI email, emailing RFIs with the link to download the references, that's a big deal. That was always something that I just didn't quite understand, and I thought, man, I can't wait till they add that feature. And so that's a big deal. One more thing I did want to mention. Within the help section, what's new? I did come across a couple new features that aren't yet released. And so even though it says May and we're now into June, you may discover a feature or two that is documented here, but not officially released. And so odds are it's probably going to come out on the next release. But if you come across that and you give us a call, we'll take a look and we'll let you know. It's like, yep, it's not officially available yet. So just be aware. And one of them had to do with the mobile app. And so I won't bring it up, but it had to do with the mobile app. And it was I thought an important feature on the mobile app that's not yet active yet. So I'll hold off before I bring that up.
Awesome. I think that's an important thing to call out. When would they expect the next kind of update or release, do you think, for those particular ones?
Yeah, so Autodesk has a roadmap. They will share some information with us, not everything, so we can kind of see what's coming out. But they don't actually announce. They don't let us know when the official release will be. You can see here, just looking at the dates we have here, it looks like it's about every couple months. There are updates that come out, minor updates that come out in between. Sometimes they call them silent updates. So right now we're at May, so June, July, August. So maybe around August there's going to be another big update that we might have another webinar then.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, it doesn't look like we have any questions in the chat, but guys, if you think of something that you wanted to ask, you didn't think of during the webinar, you can email us at info@asti.com. You can also email myself at mscott@asti.com. I do want to thank you all for joining us today. We hope it was meaningful and impactful for you and your businesses. And we definitely look forward to seeing you on future webinars. And Mark, thank you so very much.
Great. Thank you, everyone.